And she focused on identifying root causes of these chronic illnesses, from stealth infections to environmental factors. Her medical journey started at the University of Louisville, and it mirrored the experiences of her patients. She battled anxiety, hormone imbalances, and adrenal dysfunction. Her personal experiences led her to explore these underlying causes of these conditions beyond just the confines of traditional medical training. So after 6 years of practicing as an MD, she shifted her focus to explore alternative approaches in medicine, and she has gained experience in functional medicine, nutrigenomics, ozone therapy, and she's aiming to offer comprehensive solutions for chronic diseases. And today, she's renowned for addressing complex health issues like Lyme disease, parasites, and mold-related health hazards. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're going to find this next person very interesting, as will I. Please put your hands together and we'll give a warm welcome to Dr. Jess Peatross.
Can you guys hear me okay? No. Now? Better? Excellent. Well, as you guys know, I'm known as Dr. Jess, and I'm really excited and honored to be able to speak to you guys today. I hope that most of you have a little bit of medical training or medical background and that you brought your swimsuits because you're going to be drinking from a fire hose today. And if you've heard me speak before, I give you a lot of detailed information, and this speech is going to be no different. I am actually starting out because I would be remiss if I did not speak of one of those underutilized and overlooked drainage pathways, which is bile. And you really can't speak about estrogen metabolism without speaking about this drainage pathway known as bile. So the beginning of my speech is going to be talking about the very detailed and energy laborious bile pathway. So get your cameras and your notes ready. So first and foremost, what is bile? Stay awake for me, guys. I'm going to be lively so you guys can't fall asleep after lunch. So, and what is bile? Bile is an alkaline green to yellow fluid, and it's produced by cells in the liver known as hepatocytes. And it's stored in this little sac that hangs under the liver called the gallbladder. And you guys know it's very frequently taken out. And who knew? Bile is mostly water, 97 to 98% water. And it's 0.78% bile salts. And we'll talk about those in a minute and why those are so important. And 0.2% is bilirubin. And what's bilirubin? It's actually the breakdown of red blood cells, hemoglobin, which carries oxygen, and glucuronidation, which happens in phase 2 liver detox. And that is what produces bilirubin. 0.51% are fats, different types of fats, things like cholesterol, fatty acids, and lecithin. And bile acids are derived from the breakdown of cholesterol. So if you have increased bile acid biosynthesis, you might have increased cholesterol synthesis. And if you've ever put your clients or patients on TUDCA, tauroursodeocholic acid, you might see that their cholesterol bumps a little bit temporarily. And this is why. You're getting the promotion of bile and formation of bile from this bile salt. And actually, our body is very efficient at this process. We'll talk about how it recycles things. And the adult human makes 400 to 600 milliliters of bile per day. And it would have to be a whole lot more if it weren't for the enterohepatic circulation. So the number one promoter of bile flow and formation is the passage of conjugated bile salts into the caniculus. Say what, Dr. Jess? So what that means is that the passage of bile salts, which help to form bile, move into these things called caniculi, which are like little highways that surround each liver cell or hepatocyte. And they form bigger and bigger bile ducts. It's literally like a river draining into different creeks. So what are bile acids? What are bile salts? Why are they important? Where do they come from? Let's dig in. I know you guys are super excited. So primary bile acids, these are produced by the liver cells, the hepatocytes I've talked about. They actually secrete conjugated bilirubin, bile salts, cholesterol, phospholipids, proteins, ions, and water into the caniculi. Now this is very energy laborious. You can see there are lots of different positive and negative charges going in here that create an osmotic pool that we'll talk about. Secondary bile acids are formed by these little buggers in your gut, in your duodenum, in the small intestines, called bacteria. Very smart, they're also our friends, right? And they actually absorb from the intestines and they circulate together with the primary bile acids. And all bile acids, whether primary or secondary, once they're secreted, they have to be conjugated. And they're conjugated with amino acids, either glycine or taurine. You've already heard me mention TUDCA, taurine-ursodeoxycholic acid. The T in TUDCA stands for taurine. Taurine can cross the blood-brain barrier and affect cognition. It's very cool. So once the bile acids have a glycine or a taurine, they're known as salts, bile salts. So here's some primary and some conjugated bile salts and acids. And you can see the first one, bile acids, they have a hydroxyl group on them. This means they're not as ionized. They don't have as negative a charge. That means they're not quite as active. They can't scrub things down like other bile acids can or bile salts can. Bile salts have an amide bind with glycine or taurine, as I talked about. What you can see is they're fully ionized. That means they're great scrubbers. They can scrub down fats and lipids and help you increase surface area to digest your food. So let's go over the overview of bile flow and synthesis. And it's pretty complicated, so I'm going to go back and forth between, actually, they put it on one slide for me. Excellent. Thanks, guys. Okay, so you can see here the liver is the site of bile formation, bile acids, and reuptake of urobilinogen. The bile ducts actually modify and transport bile. Remember, they're the highways in between the hepatocytes that get bigger and form bile ducts. And they secrete ions and water into bile. The gallbladder, little sac you can see it right here at the green sac underneath the liver, is what holds the bile. We're going to see how important the gallbladder is. Small intestines, as you can see, the stomach is very acidic. Once bile gets dumped into the duodenum of the small intestines, it becomes alkaline. And that's when our digestion of fats began, the lipid digestion, the absorption facilitated by bile. And the ileum, the last part of the small intestines, is where things are reabsorbed from the gut and back into the bloodstream, where they continue back into the enterohepatic circulation, and they're transported back to the liver for reabsorption and reuse. Our body would spend tons of more energy if we didn't have this capability. Our body is so intelligent. And then bacteria within the gut help us to form secondary acids by dehydroxylation of the bile acids. They remove that OH group I talked about. And then finally, the rectum, you have urobilin and stercobilin. They're actually compounds that are oxidized from urobilinogen, and this is what makes your stool dark. So the main steps in the formation of bile are the uptake of bile acids and ions from the plasma across the basolateral sinusoidal membrane. Now, what's that mean? That means that we're reabsorbing the bile acids from the bloodstream back through the hepatocyte and into the caniculi. And I'll have a picture that shows this in a minute. And my point in telling you guys this, why is this important? This is important because it requires a sodium-potassium ATPase pump. And it's pumping against a diffusion gradient. Do you know how much energy this takes? A ton. This is a very energy laborious process. So if you have somebody who's suffering from mitochondrial dysfunction or cell danger response, this is a very energy laborious process, and they're probably going to have stagnation of bile. Excretion of bile through the canicular membrane. Remember that little highway that runs around each liver cell that looks like a cytoskeleton. So this is what happens in the formation of bile. We pull it through the plasma, through the hepatocyte, to the caniculi, into the bile ducts. Here's a very detailed picture. Please don't get overwhelmed. I'll explain it. So you can see here in the top left corner, there's the classic hepatic lobule there. And then they're going to actually zoom in on it in the bottom picture and show you what the inside of it looks like. Look how detailed. You have the caniculi, you have the different cytoskeletons, and they actually show you at the top middle picture how the bile caniculi run across each hepatic lobule and hepatocyte. And they form bigger and bigger ducts as they go through. So transporter proteins use energy to secrete molecules into bile against diffusion gradient, just like I said. So pumps require energy. So you must have someone who can go through glycolysis, through the Krebs cycle, and make the ATP they need to finish these processes. There we go. All right, we're going to flip back and forth here with this picture. So caniculi drain into the left and right common hepatic duct of the liver. The common hepatic duct of the liver, the left and the right side, join to form the common hepatic duct. You guys see right there in the gallbladder that's green, you see the hepatic ducts, the left and the right. Okay, come down to form the common bile duct, which then joins to form the cystic duct, right? So everything can get really jammed there. You can see lots of stones there. You can see lots of problems with sludge, sticky, thick bile with patients. If there's a problem with hormones. Let's go back. With a meal, and this is what I want you guys to realize, with a meal, the gallbladder contracts when you eat fat. The sphincter of Oddi, that's the little valve that shoots and expels bile out into the duodenum when you have a fatty meal. It only works under the influence of the vagus nerve. How many people are in flight or fight? Great reason to have a cholecystectomy. Great reason. Because listen, you can only have the sphincter of Oddi open in parasympathetic mode or rest and digest. You're in flight or fight, you have a dyskinetic gallbladder. I have a personal story about that. Medical school, guess who was in flight or fight? Imagine that. So, I was having right upper quadrant pain with things like salad dressings and fatty meals. I wasn't really awake then to how important food was in medical school. That's why I was in medical school. So, I started having right upper quadrant pain, and I went and had an ultrasound of my gallbladder. I didn't have any sludge, I didn't have any stones, but I went above and beyond, and I got what the next step is called a HIDA scan. And a HIDA scan uses something called cholecystokinin, or CCK, that is what's released from your body when you eat a fatty meal. So they're kind of stimulating what it looks like when you eat a fatty meal. And my gallbladder had a 12% ejection fraction. Horrid. And so, I had something called a dyskinetic gallbladder because of stress. What that means is my gallbladder was fibrillating rather than contracting and dispelling bile all at once. And this was causing me a lot of nausea and right upper quadrant pain in medical school. And I ended up fixing it with diet. And that's when the beginning of my journey started to kind of unfold. But this to show you, my vagus nerve was in dorsal vagal tone, which is the opposite of rest and digest, and really caused a problem for my dysfunctional gallbladder because I was stressed out. Stress is so underrated. So you can see here on the left picture, we have a picture of the brain. You can see the vagus nerve has control over the sphincter of Oddi there in the gallbladder. And you can see how CCK, or cholecystokinin, is released in cycles back to the gallbladder to cause the contraction of the sphincter of Oddi. 50% of our bile is secreted into the small intestines and aids in digestion of lipids. That's a lot, 50%. It acts as a surfactant, and they are fully ionized, and they are able to react as something called micelles, like a detergent, scrubbing things down. That's what it's like. Efficient conservation of bile acids by absorption from the small intestines results in a pool that can recirculate. We talked about this multiple times a day, and that really, our body could not do it without this. And this really is called the enterohepatic circulation, recycle the bile. This is phase 3 liver detox. Revives the gut. We're going to talk about that. Greatly exceeds the rate at which bile acids can be made from cholesterol. So here's the biochemistry behind the hydrolysis of lipids by pancreatic lipase. As you guys notice, pancreatic enzyme. We can see a triglyceride there, plus water. Lipase is able to break it down into 2 free fatty acids and a monoglyceride, single fat molecule. And so that's, again, by scrubbing, or kind of like a detergent, a surfactant to break everything up. So as you can see, there's a big kind of fat globule in here, a lipid, and we see a bile salt. And there's a hydrophobic, which means it loves fat, and a hydrophilic side, which means it loves water. How smart is our body? Look at that. So when it gets up to the fat molecule, it's got to have the side that likes fat up next to the fat molecule to work. And the other side around the serum or whatever to break, that's hydrophilic state. And so you can see they all kind of get around that and are able to scrub it down and increase the surface area for absorption. So what's the purpose of all this? The dispersion of fat into micelles increases the surface area, as I just mentioned, and that it lets you digest cholesterol and fats. They are released from the gallbladder as these little surfactant molecules called micelles and ready to work. Without bile salts, you know what you guys would do? You dump fat out in your feces. You ever seen your stool float? It's fat. And you're not supposed to dump more than 20% out a day. And so if you do that, you're probably going to have a problem with fat-soluble vitamins, things like A, D, E, and K, which are stored in the fat. That's why you could overdose on these vitamins if you're not careful. They don't break down like other vitamins that are water-soluble. And so if you're having trouble with bile and with micelles and scrubbing things down and the absorption of fats, you are going to have deficiencies in A, D, E, and K. And if you don't know, vitamin A is kind of needed for measles, things like that, viruses. All right, so bile has this kind of like Goldilocks ratio, where you can't have too little and you can't have too much. You have to have just the right amount. And if the bile cells aren't working properly, cholesterol isn't broken down, and it can thicken the bile in the gallbladder. So we see this a lot of times with inflammation, and stress alone can raise the cholesterol. And why is that? Because really bile flows in parasympathetic mode. So everything starts to stagnate, and as I always say, stagnation breeds disease. So bile acids can become cytotoxic if they're present at too high concentrations, either in the cell or out of the cell. And they start to actually what we think damage mitochondria through apoptosis of cells and necrosis. So you have to have the right amount. If you have a deficiency in bile acids, you can absorb fats properly. They actually did a study that if conjugated bile acids are fed orally, like TUDCA is fed to patients, the micellar solubilization, I can't say that word, solubilization is restored and improved lipid absorption results. And I've seen that. Haven't you guys seen that? If anybody gives TUDCA, it improves, yes. Okay, this is a pretty cool slide. So bombesin VIP, your vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, and secretin all increase bile flow. Great. However, somatostatin, gastrin, insulin, and endothelin inhibit the flow. So what does that mean? What if we have someone with a problem with water-damaged homes, or sick building syndrome, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, or SIRS? There are problems with mold. Mold will get the liver, it'll get the bile, it'll get the mitochondria real fast. And so if you have mold or SIRS, you have a low VIP. That means your bile is not going to flow as well. What happens if you're diabetic? You have high insulin. You're at risk for losing your gallbladder. The vagus nerve is intimately involved in this, in flow and secretion. And so if you're stuck in flight or fight, you have mold, you have diabetes, there is going to be issues with the bile. This should be one of the drainage pathways you guys look at first. All right, let's move into some hormones here. All right, so the connection between bile and estrogen. So the enterohepatic circulation, the proper flow is integral to this hormone balance. And let's just review really quick. There are 3 different types of estrogen, right? We have E1, it's made in the ovaries before menopause. It is actually the dominant circulating estrogen post-menopause, and it can be converted back and forth to estradiol in the body. These can go back and forth. And it's less potent than estradiol or E2. E2, the major form of estrogen produced in the ovaries in perimenopausal woman, you want this at about 60 to 75% on a lot of your hormonal tests. It should be the dominant one. It's also produced by the adrenals and the placenta. So sometimes what we see is women who are stuck in flight or fight, and they're like, approaching menopause, and they still have these regular cycles. What happens is the adrenals can pick up and make E2, keep cycles regular. But the minute you get them out of flight or fight, their cycles will become irregular because the adrenals don't have to pick up the slack anymore. It's also important for maintaining female reproductive tissues, bone growth, heart health, all that good stuff, right? And so it's really a Goldilocks molecule too. We hate on estrogen too much, but it's really what gives us our hips and our curves and our brain and all that stuff, right? It's thought to play a role in diseases like endometriosis and different cancers, obviously. Estriol or E3, it's the least potent form of estrogen. However, it is the most proliferative. So you got to think tissue neoplasia and growth. It is dominant during pregnancy as it's made by the placenta. And we really want to watch this on some of the hormone tests because it is the most proliferative form. So, and then some estrogens, you guys, are produced by phytoestrogens. Food, or they're made synthetically. Xenoestrogens and xenobiotics. And you know what's really cool? Vibrant just added to their hormone test a endocrine disruptor panel on it. So now you can look at 3 different estrogens and progesterone, and you can look at cortisol through the spit test, And you can see if there's a problem with xenoestrogens that are leading to their overall estrogen load. That's pretty cool. So bile and hormones again, estrogen and progesterone, as we talked about, if the ratio is off. People always talk about, when I was in medical school, doctors didn't know how to read hormones. I'll just tell you. I'm an MD. I was a hospitalist. They don't know how to read hormones. They're like, it's in the reference range. Good for you. And they don't even look at the ratio, P2 to E, they don't even look at it. And so it's really not about what one number is or not. It's about the ratio of them to each other. Hormones are a delicate balance and a symphony of different chemicals, and then you have to have them harmonized. So if you have the ratio of estrogen to progesterone off, you will see a higher ratio of cholesterol to bile salts. This is the supersaturation of bile. This is when things start to get sticky and sludgy. You go get an ultrasound, there's sludge in the gallbladder. They also cause a higher propensity of the bile to aggregate or clump together, and they make it sticky. And then on top of that, if that wasn't enough, a lower than normal functioning of gallbladder emptying. So again, it's the bile sits stagnant in the gallbladder sac. What happens when blood sits stagnant in the atrium or ventricles? Same thing here. So here's Vibrance hormone test. And as you can see, we can see the 3 different types of estrogen here. And you can see that this person has a little bit too much E2. We also want to look at all the different CYP enzymes here, sending them down the 16-OH, the 4-OH, and 2-OH pathway. Now, if you look at the graph, we really want the 2-H pathway to be the most dominant, obviously, 55 to 75%. And you can see they do pretty well with the 4-OH pathway. They only go down that path 2%. We want it ideally 8 to 15% or 16%. That's because the 4-OH pathway is carcinogenic. You don't want to go down that pathway. You see you form quinones, very reactive, very inflammatory to the brain. How do you get rid of that? You have to detox it out through glutathione. So you can see how important glutathione is in phase 2 liver detox, getting rid of that dangerous 4-OH pathway. What happens if you don't have glutathione or the precursors to make it? The 4-OH forms DNA adducts that bind to change the structure of your DNA, increase the cancer risk. It's very important things to monitor. The 16-OH pathway, again, she's going down 14%. We wanted about 14 to 33%. Again, the most proliferative pathway. So we really have to kind of watch that one too. As you can see with the 2-OH pathway on the bottom, the one that we want most people going down, look what you need. You need a COMT and you need some methylation to be able to fully detox in phase 2. You can see where she goes to 2-OH pathway at the very bottom, she's still high there. That indicates some liver stagnation. Guess what? If you have a slow COMT, those are the people that if they hear good or bad news at night, they're pinged. They can't sleep. They call them warriors. They make things like adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, even estrogen. They leave it out longer in the synaptic cleft, and they can't break it down as well. So they're kind of like pinged, always worrying, always on edge. Then there's the warriors. I'm a warrior genotype. That means that I can degrade those neurotransmitters and norepinephrine very quickly in the synaptic cleft. These people are also going to have problems with hormones a lot. MTHFR, a problem with methylation. Guess what? I didn't have MTHFR. I had a hormone test that had the highest methylation. And with some of the worst stress in my life in the last 6 years, and guess what activated? The methylation. Because the environment signals the genes. Come on. There we go. So this explains why pregnant women have a lot of gallbladder problems, does it not? High estrogen in pregnancy obviously results in more cholecystectomies if we're not careful, increases the stickiness, saturation, and delayed emptying of the gallbladder. So bile helps to release estrogen out of the bowels. However, there is something in the gut that can help make us reabsorb estrogen. And we really don't want that to happen so much, right? That's bad when that starts to happen to people. And obviously, I don't have to tell you guys, a healthy gut equals healthy hormones. Now, why is that? I always tell people, if your immunity sucks, you're not happy, and you can't sleep, look at your gut, right? The gut makes 90% of the serotonin. Serotonin's the happy neurotransmitter, happy hormone when we're in right ratios, the Goldilocks ratio. Serotonin converts into melatonin. Okay? All tied in. So bile and the microbiome, the gut that we're just talking about, include phase 3 estrogen metabolism, or the enteric hepatic cycle. Estrogens are normally metabolized by something called beta-glucuronidase, and this is made by negative pathogens or negative bacteria in the gut. You don't want too much of this bacteria. A lot of people have had a lot of antibiotics, maybe a lot of steroids, a lot of other problems with their gut, are probably going to have a lot of beta-glucuronidase producing bacteria. And this isn't good, because what this does, beta-glucuronidase opposes glucuronidation in the liver. So it stops it. And what that means is that estrogen that's been tagged for disposal out the bowels, that has been freed up, is bound up, is able to go out the bowels. If it's deconjugated and we release it and it's free, that tells the body to reabsorb it back into the bloodstream. And it's able to act on estrogen receptors in the body again. So talk about estrogen dominance. What happens if people aren't pooping? This is why constipation is such a big deal. And it's such a big deal. So again, beta-glucuronidase is made by an unhealthy estrobolome. That's the microbiome with estrogen made in the microbiome. You need glucuronidation in phase 2 liver detox. It's blocked by beta-glucuronidase. So they did this study in 2016, and what they did was they injected women with radio-labeled estrogen. And they were actually really shocked, because they expected all the estrogen to be pooped out. And guess what? It wasn't. Actually, 65% was reabsorbed and reversed from its unconjugated or active form. It was reabsorbed back into the intestine, from the intestines into the bloodstream. And you can see what's in the bloodstream there, circulating estrogen in the bloodstream. What that means is that the kidneys have to pee them out. So the more estrogen you see in the urine, it means the more you might be reabsorbing. So what's the estrobolome? I've already talked about it briefly. This is the aggregate of enteric bacterial genes whose products are capable of metabolizing estrogens and acts on conjugated estrogens and estrogen metabolites with downstream physiologic effects. Smart bacterias. Smart. And the estrobolome is influenced by factors as Roundup Ready or glyphosate, diet, lifestyle, antibiotic use, whether you had a vaginal delivery or you were stillbirth by C-section, age, and alcohol. Many other things too, but these are the big ones. So as you can see here, you can't see in this picture, but we have the estrobolome with healthy versus unhealthy bacteria. And you can see if it's unhealthy, you're going to deconjugate hydrolysis of estrogen metabolism in the GI tract, and you're going to reabsorb them back into the enterohepatic circulation to return to the liver or the bloodstream, and the cycle continues. Only if the estrogen is conjugated does it leave through the feces. And so you can see the estrogen metabolites, once in the bloodstream, can increase the ratio of 16-OH to 2-OH estrogens. And what does that mean? Proliferation of tissues. Estrogen-driven neoplasia. And this is where we have high risk of cancer. So this is Vibrant's gut test, the gut zoomer, and as you can see, I have a couple numbers here I want you guys to look at. You can see that this person's gut function probably isn't so great. They have some low short-chain fatty acids, which are like good food for good bacteria, and she's pretty low in this. You can see the beta-glucuronidase there. This person is probably suffering really bad cycles, gut issues, bloating, maybe some brain fog and fatigue as well. And you can see that this is a problem. It's produced by anaerobic pathogenic bacteria in the gut. And we see this a lot. We see this a lot with people. So you have to get them pooping and really think about DIM, calcium D-glucarate. So you might be asking what bacteria make up the estrobolome, and we have found a couple actually in recent studies. There are enteric bacterial genes that help to produce this beta-glucuronidase that we don't want too much of. One of them is the GUS gene, found more in the Firmicutes phyla of the bacteria in the gut. The other one is the BG gene. It's recently discovered via metagenomic analysis, and this is more in the Bacteroides phyla of bacteria in the gut. And what's interesting is there was a few studies I looked at, one in particular, in E. coli, beta-glucuronidase activity was controlled by bacterial population density, better known as quorum sensing. Quorum sensing is like, here's a good example of it. You guys have seen those like squids and things way deep underwater and they light up all at the same time? That's bacterial population densities talking to each other remotely. That's what that is quorum sensing. So these bacteria get in things like biofilms, they're little colonies, and they're able to talk via genetic variants, and they're actually very intelligent. And so we think some of this beta-glucuronidase activity is happening in biofilms with very smart bacteria talking in quorum sensing. There are actually 60 bacterial genre colonizing human GI tract that encode beta-glucuronidase, or beta-galactosidases colonizing the human GI tract. And so you can see there's a few of them that we found. We've also found a lot of these in the mouth, right, as well. So let's talk about melatonin for just a minute, because melatonin is actually interesting when you look at it with estrogen metabolism and the estrobolome. So what you can see here is if you have conjugated estrogens on the left, you have excretion. If you have deconjugated estrogens on the right, you actually are going to reabsorb them and have an increased breast cancer risk. But what happens if your gut isn't right and you're producing a lot of beta-glucuronidase? Guess what? You can't really make melatonin very well. You can't. So melatonin is actually going to be blocked if you have a leaky gut or gut issues or gut bacteria producing beta-glucuronidase. And that's not good, right? This actually increases the risk of developing cancer. And, you know, Dr. Jack Kruse has talked a lot about how, you know, having it pitch black at night helps you produce melatonin, and light is really what signals all of us and our circadian rhythms and our hormone release. And so if the light is, if your city is really bright with lots of loud noises, your gut's a mess, you're constantly pinged with a slow COMT, you're going to have problems producing melatonin. And that's not good because melatonin is intimately involved with estrogen metabolism and creating breast cancer risk. So here, just driving the point home, an imbalance in melatonin, or the circadian rhythm and how your body releases hormones based on light and dark, and in the composition of intestinal bacteria with beta-glucuronidase could produce dysbiosis, or leaky gut, and causes an increase in circulating estrogen levels and increases breast cancer risk. So it's really important to sleep, guys, is what I'm saying. Okay, interestingly enough, the estrobolome of the GI tract, and actually the vagina in women with endometriosis, has more bacteria that produce beta-glucuronidase. That's probably not surprising to most of you. Obviously, this drives a lot of the estrogen dominance and inflammation that can make endometriosis worse. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, also influenced by the estrobolome, but if in a different way, we think they have lowered beta-glucuronidase activity, which produces higher androgen levels and lower levels of estrogen. But again, tying into the gut hormones here. Breast cancer clearly linked, we talked about it. All right, guys, so the effects on the estrobolome from environmental factors. Number one, antibiotics. I think one person in here has had antibiotics. Are you in here? No? That was amazing. I thought it was good because I only had maybe 5 antibiotics as a kid. I always had that pink stuff, amoxicillin. You guys remember that bubblegum pink stuff? Yeah. So here's an interesting study that I had to put in here because we all hate on antibiotics, but I just wanted to show this one on ampicillin. Very interesting. Causes a large increase in fecal conjugated estrogen, so it helps you to poop out estrogen. And it also showed a reduction in the estrogen that came out of the urine from the bloodstream. So ampicillin actually helps you dispose of estrogen. However, I'm going to throw in a competing study that showed the opposite. All classes of antibiotics were associated with increased breast cancer risk. And association remained after you adjusted for different factors. Obviously, we think that exposure with antibiotics matters more in childhood when you're kind of developing microbiome, a developing immune system within that microbiome. And so really protecting our kids from unnecessary antibiotics is crucial. And this is a rhetorical question, but what do antibiotics do to mitochondrial DNA? You know, mitochondria, powerhouses of the cell, they come from our maternal line. They do have ancient DNA in them, and they don't have the same repair mechanisms in sizing and cutting out problems within the DNA that our regular DNA can do. So what are we doing to mitochondrial DNA that can't repair as well with tons of antibiotics? Here again is the gut zoomer. You can see the beta-glucuronidase again, and I wanted to continue on. Fecal zonulin. This is a measure of leaky gut. How separate the cells are in the gut is this number. And I will tell you a story to just drive the point home with me again. Last year I was very, very sick. And it was from stress, actually. I mentioned that I was a warrior genotype, so my body protects me from feeling pain. I never feel bad. But last year I was suicidal. So if I'm gonna feel bad, I'm gonna just act crazy. Like mentally, right? Have you guys seen this with your patients and clients before? Sometimes they hurt mentally and emotionally rather than physically. And that's me. And I didn't know what was wrong. I was in a really toxic relationship for almost 6 years. I actually, in the last 6 years, willingly surrendered my medical license for doing childhood vaccine exemptions in California. It was the hardest decision I ever had to make. And I also was sued by people who stole my supplement company. And I miscarried. And so I was so sick. I was 30 pounds heavier than I am now. I had asymmetry in my face. This eye was smaller and higher than the other one. I was suicidal. And I didn't know what was wrong. And I finally, bad doctor, got some blood work. And my CRP was 8. My MCV was 106. My homocysteine was 14. My iron was 9. My vitamin D was 12. And I was eating good. I was eating well. I was eating meats. I was eating organic. But you know what? It didn't matter. You know, I learned me something. I learned me something because stress is so underrated. It took me down, you guys. It took me down, and I couldn't absorb and assimilate my nutrition. And do you know what happened? Because I had a rip-roaring B vitamin deficiency. That stress turned on my MTHFR. I didn't have it before that. It epigenetically activated because the environment signals the genes. And then I couldn't detox. I couldn't lose weight. I lost, you have to have B vitamins to make neurotransmitters and hormones, right? So you know what? That gave me a traumatic brain injury because that injured my brain. And I went and spent a week at a brain clinic to try and reverse it. And guess what? When you injure here, you injure here. My zonulin was about that high because the traumatic brain injury from a B vitamin deficiency from stress caused leaky gut. So you can see how things start to unravel just from sympathetic overdrive, where you are in a different vagal tone and all your hormones, neuropeptides, neurotransmitters are released at a rate that's skewed. And your insulin too. And I am a walking picture of that. And I reversed it. I reversed it in a year. So, thanks, guys. I'm going to calm my ass down. Okay, the secretory A, Sig A, the last one here, you can see very high. Often I see this with parasites. There's something being missed within the gut. This is the white blood cells in the mucous membranes. They are making an army. For some reason, they're seeing something, and they're really peaked. This is lots of inflammation for people. Lots and lots of inflammation. If I ever see that low, I try something like serum bovine IgG or colostrum. So being overweight in diet, very important. A low-fiber diet leads to increased estrogen plasma levels. Fiber is like a little broom that goes through and sweeps the GI tract clean. Like a little natural binder that goes through the GI tract. And so fiber is extremely important for estrogen dominance. That's why it's really important to get your ladies who have problems with hormones eating correctly. High fat, if you're overweight, you're going to produce estrogen and adipose cells. That's what happens. Convenience food, packaged in plastic. Endocrine disruptors. Remember y'all, Vibrant has that now. Okay, what are some solutions here? Fermented foods, as long as people don't have histamine issues or MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, are great. Things like sauerkraut, kimchi, wonderful to rebalance the good gut bacteria. Certain probiotic strains can help decrease bacteria, the nasty bacteria that produce too much beta-glucuronidase, so that's really helpful as well. There's certain foods that are high in prebiotics, the good food that feeds probiotics. They are high in things called fructooligosaccharides. Think inulin, chicory, asparagus, onions, garlic, all of these are really helpful. And then fiber supports healthy gut, we just mentioned, and levels of estrogen. And obviously, but in the studies, avocado and grapefruit were particular standouts. And I can't say enough good things about cruciferous vegetables and root vegetables. Broccoli, cabbage have things like DIM and sulforaphane in them. And sulforaphane, as Dr. Hyman mentioned, is really useful for helping to form glutathione, master antioxidant. And we need that to get rid of the bad estrogen, guys. Mold. I would not be the mold doctor if I wasn't up here saying something about mold, so I had to put it in here somewhere. So mycotoxins, they're lipophilic in nature. They love fat. They love it. You're going to find it in the bile, 100% in the brain. They also do this weird thing where they colonize mucous membranes. So you'll have people leave a water-damaged house, and they'll be mouth breathing for years after they're out of the house. Why? Because mold does this thing where it can set up residence in the mucous membranes, the gut. It's called SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth, or in the sinus cavities, where I mostly see it, where you can get a Marcon swab to see if they're positive or not for mold. Actually, it looks for methicillin-sensitive staph, which is only allowed to live in the nose because mold is lowering the immune system. And what happens in the mucous membranes is you kind of become this little mycotoxin-making factory in there. And so people, you have to really get in there with things, nasal lavages and washes, and I even like certain homeopathics put in here and kind of run through the sinus cavities. There are a couple mycotoxins which are estrogenic in nature. Zearalenone is one of them, and the lesser extent is ochratoxin. Now, zearalenone looks just like estrogen to the body. It binds to estrogen receptors. Every time I see this high on a mold test, I can almost guarantee you that someone has an estrogen dominance or is having PMS, at the very least. Actually, mold metabolites in a study have been found in a domestic draft animal in China, the E. acinus. And you can see here, uptake of the mycotoxin ochratoxin in liver cells occurs via the blah, 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 blah. That's not important. But ochratoxin normally goes after the kidneys. It's aflatoxin that goes after the liver. You can see ochratoxin is a mycotoxin produced by mold. It causes nephropathies in human and domestic animals as a major pathogenic contaminant of cereal and animal feed and water-damaged homes. But when you take it orally and on intestinal absorption, a large part of ochratoxin is taken up by hepatocytes and eliminated into the bile. You want to get rid of mold? You work on the bile in the liver. Number 4, herbicides and pesticides. Many are endocrine disruptors that look like hormones. You can see mixture effects of estrogenic pesticides at the human estrogen receptor alpha and beta. 1000%. Glyphosate is one of them. And it's not a persistent organic pollutant, but a pseudo-persistent organic pollutant. And what that means is that when some of these things that are fat soluble, people say, oh, they're generally recognized as safe. You're forgetting they don't break down. They're additive. They're fat soluble. That's why that doesn't work, generally recognized as safe. Phthalates and parabens, considered xenoestrogens, probably something you guys will be able to see in the new Vibrant test. Please minimize the use of plastics if we can. I know when we're traveling or other places, it's really hard. So just do your best, obviously. The only wonderful thing about plastics is that BPA leaves the system in about a week, and you stop using plastics because it's able to leave the body. Be mindful of personal care products. Even synthetic fragrances often have endocrine disruptors in them. Please use all-natural laundry detergent. Fabric softeners and sheets are like the worst thing you guys can use. So bad. They're so bad for your hormones. And please choose unbleached chlorine-free products. Coffee filters, think about that. Tea bags, toilet paper. I mean, cotton is like the most sprayed thing in the world with pesticides. I often think about like gauze in the hospital. You're putting on wounds and toilet paper we're using. You know? Okay, top 11 xenoestrogens to avoid. I'm sure many of these will be found on the new Vibrant test. Dioxins, number one, thank God they've taken them out of all the tampons. Can you believe that they put those in tampons? Horrid. PCBs, polychlorinated bisphenol, obviously really, really bad too. You find these in a lot of tap water showers. Flame retardants, Scotch Guard, all that stuff. Horrible. Horrible. Please replace your guys' nonstick pans. Please. I really like Extrema. They're really good, but please find something safe. BPA, obviously, we mentioned already. Phthalates as well. Perchlorate is a byproduct, it's a chlorine byproduct they use to clean the water, and when it combines with other things, it forms very toxic perchlorate. So I always recommend people get a water filter too, if you can, to avoid this. Make sure it takes out chlorine and fluoride. PFCs, again, PFOAs, things like that, really terrible for the endocrine system as well. Organophosphate pesticides and atrazine. You guys know that atrazine was feminizing male frogs, right? Yeah. Arsenic, mercury, and lead. Many people don't think of heavy metals necessary as xenoestrogens, but they are. And arsenic is something that can leave the body in a week too. Once the exposure is gone, it really leaves the body. Mercury and lead are a different story, obviously. Mercury can stay in the body sometimes for years, and really lies in the fascial and the lymph systems. Lead as well, people get really freaked out by lead. It lowers IQ and it's stored in the bones. But I can show you a study. It's a very small study. There needs to be other studies done, so don't get too excited. It's a very small study, but it does show that mercury, lead, cadmium, and I think arsenic as well can be sweated out of the body at a higher rate than in the feces or urine. That's why I love my Kill Bind Sweat protocol. It sounds like I'm an S&M doctor, but it's really just taking an herbal antimicrobial, a binder, and getting in a sauna. You're mopping up what you're sweating out. And, I couldn't believe that lead could leave the body that way. And when you think about it, guys, a lot of these metals get in the body and they do something called ionic mimicry. Aluminum is 2+ charged like magnesium. Can replace some of these things. So if you have enough mineralization, you can knock that off via ionic mimicry. And if your drainage is open, you can poop and you can sweat, you can pee okay, and your bile's flowing and your liver's working, your body does it itself. Stress. Here to talk about me. So obviously melatonin's connection to healthy estrogen levels. You need to be able to sleep. If you're pinged in flight or fight, you're gonna have trouble getting into a deep REM sleep. Prolonged stress, known to increase cortisol. It happened to me. I had some belly fat. It happened to me, I know. Dorsal vagal tone. What's more common than flight or fight? Functional freeze. I was in it. And that means that you really are fine as long as you're doing your daily 9 to 5 that you're used to. If anything out of the ordinary is brought up or has to happen, you really kind of freak out and you can't handle it. And you'd rather just lay on the couch and cocoon. In your little comfort bubble, you're in dorsal freeze, my friend. You don't feel like you belong, can't make decisions. That's even more common than flight or fight. People say, I work out every day, why can't I lose weight? Because you're laying on the couch 23 hours a day and you worked out for an hour. That was me. I'm using myself as an example, so don't worry. So best thing you can do is open your drainage pathways, guys. I can't stress this enough. I consider myself a drainage doctor. 80% of people feel better with opening drainage. Now, what does that mean? As your natural emunctories, your mitochondria, your lymphatic system that drains into the deep cervical lymph nodes, and the lymphatic system that then drains into the liver, that then makes the bile that's stored in the gallbladder. Kidneys are a part of it. Lungs are a part of it. Lungs, they're the first line of defense. They detoxify 70% of toxins. Lungs. Breathe well, my friends. Skin, bowels, breast milk, and even cycles for women. All of these are drainage pathways. And if they're not flowing, stagnation breeds disease. The other thing you want to do, you can open drainage all you want, but if people aren't remineralized and their nervous system isn't balanced, no protocol will stick. Let me say it again because I had to learn the hard way. You will waste people's money and time if they are not balanced in their nervous system. You have to have it stick, or no protocol will stick. So address that first with people, and then open drainage simultaneously. There's some great nervous system courses, guys. You have to do it. The innate way of detoxification, nothing beats the body. It's smarter than all of us in here. Smart. We were fighting the body for years in the medical system. It's wrong. You need to learn how the body works. You need to understand it. And many of us haven't done that in the past, myself included as a hospitalist. And remember, guys, I'm talking about hormones here, but hormones are chemical communicators. They're not root cause. They are a delicate symphony in the harmony of, or in the orchestra of your body. And they will tell you when things are askew, but they won't be the root cause of why they're askew. So to bring the body back to homeostasis, because it's really about balance and homeostasis, not about forcing. You really want to avoid xenoestrogens and xenobiotics, because the number one rule of environmental medicine is avoidance. Imagine that. Infrared sauna, I can't say enough good things. I already mentioned my kill, bind, sweat protocol. I have a sauna at home. I get in it 3 or 4 times a week, or I go to hot yoga. If people tell you they can't sweat, they're having problems with mitochondria and ATP production. ATP equals energy, which equals heat. Okay? Epsom salt baths, wonderful way to get some magnesium to calm some people down and help the body detox. I'm a big fan of enemas and colonics. I trained in Gerson therapy, where they taught me about coffee enemas. Really helps the formation and movement of bile in the body. And I've seen it puts people in parasympathetic mode too. You wouldn't think with coffee enema, but it does. You're tagging that Vegas. Filtering the water, including the shower, so you can get all the perchlorate, the hexavalent chromium, which is the Aaron Brockovich chemical, out of your water. Very important. Throw out plastic, go green, you guys, as much as you can, not green washed, actual green. And then estrogen dominance. There's lots of different reasons people have an estrogen dominance. Get to the root cause for them. Become a Sherlock Holmes for their health. Spend an hour with each client and patient and ask them the right questions. And trace back antecedents and triggers. You will see the roadmap of why they're sick. Nervous system resets. I can't speak enough about it. I went through my own personal journey. I will never, ever, ever, ever miss that again. Ever. Circadian rhythm resets. You've got to find out the root cause of their insomnia and why they're not sleeping. I can tell you many times it's the reason above that. Nervous system dysregulation. Check the teeth. Why do I say that? So I'm kind of a mystery symptom doc. I do a lot of breast implant illness. I do a lot of infected root canals. Dentists don't like me. They come and tell me I'm wrong. I'm like, no, I've seen too much. Root canals are a no-no for me, just like breast implants. This is a man-made object in the body, has a lifetime of about 8 to 10 years. It's never gonna outlive you. It's never gonna outlive you. It's the only place to leave a dead piece of tissue in the body and think it's okay. There are thousands of porous channels in the teeth where bacteria can hide, and that's called an interference in biological medicine. That is a simmering pocket of infection that the immune system constantly has to tend to and pull energy away from other processes in the body. And let me tell you, you won't see problems with the teeth. You'll see it systemically, because the mouth is like a human homunculus that represents different organs. Don't miss teeth issues. Ask every single client about root canals and mercury amalgams. Everyone, cavitations too. Especially if they're dealing with Lyme and mold. It will prevent them from healing. And last but not least, one of the roadblocks I always look for is check home for water damage. I may not do mold detox right away, but I'm going to get them out of a water damaged building and nothing's going to work. Good luck with nervous system dysregulation and water damage too. Got to get them out. Favorite herbs and minerals for estrogen dominance? One that I really love that a lot of people don't know about is Cypress rotundus. Man, you guys, in the studies, they use this as testosterone replacement because it blocks the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. It is amazing for estrogen dominance. In fact, it's in one of the formulations that I formulated for that reason. Magnesium, come on guys, amazing. Almost 400 different enzymatic reactions in the body. It's needed for brain health. It's needed for liver detox. It's really important. Taurine or TUDCA, we already talked about how that can affect cognition, really help bile flow. B vitamins, my best friend. My best friend now. Never, never, ever underestimate the power of methylated B vitamins. If you got somebody with a slow COMT who can't take them, they feel like a tweaker, like they've had 20 cups of coffee afterwards, give them adenosine or hydroxycobalamin or SAMe. That's the secret. But most people without a slow MT do just fine with methylated B vitamins. So you have to have it to make neurotransmitters and hormones. I mean, I was in menopause, you guys. My AMH was 0.1, my anti-malarian hormone. You know why? Because I had a B vitamin deficiency. I couldn't do DNA synthesis. I couldn't make hormones. Adaptogens, things like ashwagandha, rhodiola. There's so many different types of adaptogens that really help. I love ashwagandha for that reason. Because you know, when hormones are amiss, you really need to be kind to people and help calm their moods. Give them energy. I really like liver factors and liver helpers too, things like choline, methionine, glutathione, MSM. Sometimes these things, depending on the person, sometimes they'll need some choline or methionine or glycine first to help them with phase 1 liver detox before moving on to phase 2. Because you know what, if your phase 1 doesn't work, you convert things into a more toxic intermediate. And if your phase 2 isn't working, that stays a toxic intermediate. And you can't flush it out of the body in a water-soluble system in phase 2. DIM and calcium deglucarate, really important for high beta-glucuronidase. This is going to help glucuronidation and stop the deconjugation of estrogen so it's reabsorbed by into the bloodstream. Probiotics, wonderful. Depending on the person, you can really target the type of probiotics for what they need. And I really love fulvic and humic acids. I really do. When you can get a clean source, they're full of trace minerals and they help to remove glyphosate. There's a product that has third-party human studies, and it has fulvic in it as well as some other things, and it removes glyphosate. New research has shown that bioidentical estrogen alone does not cause cancer. Remember all those studies you heard where estrogen causes cancer, adipose estrogen causes cancer? You guys, they're using synthetic hormones in studies. You know what does cause cancer? Premarin. I mean, that's pregnant horse urine. That should never be a steroid in the human woman's body. So of course it causes cancer. So the benefit outweighs the risk, and I'll stand up here and say that when the time is right for me, I will get on bioidentical hormones because I've looked at the research. I give up. How many women with PMS does it take to screw in a light bulb, funny boy? I'm sure many of you women have felt like this before, right? But knowing that we have knowledge is power, if you understand the power of bile and how it should flow for the help of hormones and pathogens, you'll never miss it again. Make sure people's drainage is open, you calm them down with their nervous system, you check for roadblocks like teeth, water damage, and breast implants, and then you go for drainage and detox, and you guys have got it. Hormones will come in line with the delicate symphony they are. Thank you.